Most people surrender control without noticing. They react to noise. They follow pressure. They obey emotion. External voices begin to dictate behavior. Opinions pull attention. Expectations distort judgment. Soon the mind no longer belongs to you. Internal authority restores that control. It begins with discipline. It grows through stillness. It survives pressure. This audiobook is about reclaiming authority over your own mind. Not through force. Through deliberate control. Most people do not notice how often they seek approval. They adjust their tone. They soften their opinions. They change their behavior depending on who is watching. They call this cooperation. They call this professionalism. But beneath the surface, something else is happening. Authority is leaving the mind. When approval becomes necessary, control moves outward. Decisions stop following internal standards. They begin following reactions from other people. That is where instability begins. Approval feels harmless. It feels social. It feels polite. But when approval becomes the measure of behavior, discipline weakens. That's the key. Approval becomes a hidden authority. You start adjusting without realizing it. You speak carefully to avoid disagreement. You avoid actions that might attract criticism. You hesitate when your judgment conflicts with expectation. Gradually, the mind stops leading. It begins negotiating. Negotiation with external opinion erodes internal authority. You have a choice. Follow approval. Or follow principle. Many people believe approval protects them. They believe it creates harmony. In reality, it creates dependence. When approval becomes necessary, your behavior becomes fragile. A single criticism can destabilize your thinking. A single disagreement can trigger self-doubt. Your direction begins to fluctuate. But discipline does not fluctuate. Discipline follows standards. Standards remain stable regardless of reaction. When you operate from standards, approval becomes irrelevant. You may still listen to feedback. You may still evaluate criticism. But the final decision does not belong to the crowd. It belongs to your internal authority. You do not need their permission to think clearly. You do not need their permission to act deliberately. Approval is optional. Discipline is essential. Most people train themselves to look outward before making decisions. They anticipate reactions. They predict judgment. They imagine how their behavior will be interpreted. This constant scanning drains attention. Attention that should support clarity becomes occupied with validation. Clarity disappears. Independence disappears. Internal authority fades. Stillness interrupts this pattern. When you stop seeking approval, the mind becomes quieter. You no longer monitor every reaction. You no longer adjust every sentence. You observe the situation. You think deliberately. Then you act according to principle. Principles anchor behavior. When principles guide decisions, reaction from others loses influence. This creates stability. Stable behavior builds confidence. Confidence strengthens discipline. But this shift requires practice. Approval seeking often feels automatic. The urge to be liked appears quickly. The urge to avoid disagreement appears quickly. Emotion pushes for safety. Safety often looks like approval. But discipline demands something different. Discipline demands honesty with yourself. You evaluate decisions based on standards. Not based on popularity. Not based on comfort. It's not about approval. It's about discipline. Discipline asks a different question. Not will they approve? But does this follow my standard? When you ask that question consistently, internal authority grows. Over time, approval loses its influence. You begin acting with clarity. Your tone becomes steadier. Your thinking becomes more precise. Your presence becomes calmer. People often sense this change. They notice the absence of hesitation. They notice the lack of approval seeking. They notice the quiet confidence. This confidence does not come from arrogance. It comes from stability. Stable individuals do not negotiate every decision. They observe. They think. They act deliberately. Approval may appear. Disapproval may appear. Neither changes the standard. This stability builds trust. People trust individuals who remain consistent. Consistency signals discipline. Discipline signals authority. Internal authority begins with this shift. Stop seeking approval as a requirement. Feedback may inform you, but it does not control you. You have a choice. Continue adjusting behavior to gain acceptance, or build discipline strong enough to act without it. When approval stops guiding decisions, clarity returns. Clarity strengthens judgment. Judgment strengthens internal authority. And internal authority protects discipline. You have now seen how approval quietly controls behavior. But independence alone is not enough. Authority also requires clear internal rules. Without standards, independence becomes confusion. The next step is building those standards. Most people wake up and negotiate with themselves. Should I start now? Should I wait? Should I do it later? Should I change the plan? Every decision becomes a small debate. Every action becomes optional. When behavior is optional, discipline weakens. This is what happens when standards do not exist. Without clear internal rules, the mind negotiates constantly. Emotion enters the discussion. Comfort enters the discussion. Excuses begin to appear. Soon action depends on mood. Mood changes every day. That's the key. Standards remove negotiation. When standards are clear, decisions become simple. You do not debate every action. You follow the rule you already established. This creates stability. Most people do the opposite. They try to rely on motivation. They wait for energy. They wait for the right feeling. But feelings fluctuate. Energy fluctuates. Motivation disappears quickly. Discipline cannot depend on something unstable. Discipline depends on standards. A standard is a decision made in advance. It defines behavior before emotion appears. It defines action before excuses arrive. This protects your authority. When a standard exists, the mind stops asking unnecessary questions. The rule is already decided. You follow it. You do not renegotiate every morning. You do not renegotiate every challenge. You follow the standard. You have a choice. Continue negotiating every action. Or establish clear internal rules. Negotiation drains mental energy. Each decision consumes attention. Over time, the mind becomes exhausted. Exhausted minds avoid discipline. Standards remove this burden. When behavior follows structure, the mind becomes calmer. Calm strengthens internal authority. But standards must be clear. Vague intentions do not work. Saying I should try harder creates confusion. Saying I will stay consistent creates negotiation. Standards must define behavior precisely. What you do. When you do it. How you respond. Precision removes uncertainty. Uncertainty invites emotion. Emotion invites delay. Delay weakens discipline. Stillness helps you build standards carefully. You pause. You evaluate what matters. You define behavior deliberately. Then you commit to it. Once the rule exists, you follow it. You do not need their permission to create your own standards. Your behavior belongs to you. External expectations may exist, but internal authority decides how you act. Many people resist standards because they fear restriction. They believe rules limit freedom. In reality, standards create freedom. Without standards, your behavior is controlled by impulse. Impulse is unpredictable. Impulse creates inconsistency. Inconsistency destroys progress. Standards protect direction. When direction remains stable, discipline becomes easier. It's not about motivation. It's about discipline. Discipline follows structure. Structure removes emotional debate. This is why disciplined individuals appear calm. They are not deciding everything in the moment. Their standards already exist. When a challenge appears, the response is already defined. This eliminates hesitation. Hesitation often creates emotional reaction. Clarity prevents this. Clear standards also build self-trust. Each time you follow a standard, your mind registers consistency. Consistency strengthens confidence. Confidence reinforces discipline. But the opposite is also true. If standards exist but are ignored, authority weakens. Self-doubt increases. Internal negotiation returns. That is why discipline must protect the standard. Not occasionally. Consistently. Even when it feels inconvenient. Even when emotion suggests delay. Standards must remain stronger than mood. Mood changes. Principles remain. When principles guide behavior, stability appears. Stable behavior builds internal authority. Authority strengthens discipline. This process compounds over time. Small standards become habits. Habits become identity. Identity becomes character. And character becomes authority. You have a choice. Let emotion negotiate your actions every day. Or build standards strong enough to remove negotiation. When standards exist, behavior becomes simpler. When behavior becomes simpler, discipline becomes stronger. And when discipline becomes stronger, internal authority becomes real. You have now learned how standards create structure for discipline. But standards alone cannot protect authority. Authority must also control how you react to the world around you. Because reactions often destroy discipline faster than decisions. Most people believe their reactions are automatic. Something happens. A comment appears. A problem emerges. Emotion rises. Reaction follows immediately. They call this natural. They call this honest. But reaction is not automatic. Reaction is trained. The mind has practiced reacting quickly for years. It learned to answer immediately. It learned to defend instantly. It learned to escalate when pressure appears. That pattern becomes habit. Habit feels automatic. But it is not. That's the key. Reaction can be controlled. Control begins with a pause. Without the pause, emotion decides behavior. Emotion does not evaluate carefully. Emotion reacts to intensity. When emotion controls the moment, discipline disappears. You have a choice. React instantly. Or pause deliberately. Most people never experience the pause. They feel something and respond immediately. Words appear quickly. Tone changes quickly. Behavior shifts quickly. The reaction often creates consequences. Later they regret the words. Later they wish they had stayed silent. Later they realize the reaction was unnecessary. But the moment has passed. The damage already exists. Stillness prevents this pattern. When something triggers emotion, pause. Not for long. Just long enough to interrupt momentum. Take one breath. Observe the situation. Observe the emotion. Notice the urge to react. The urge feels powerful. But it fades quickly when you remain still. This small gap changes everything. Reaction loses authority. Observation begins. Observation restores control. When you observe first, you gather information. You notice what actually happened. You notice what did not happen. You notice what the mind may be exaggerating. Clarity appears. Clarity protects discipline. You do not need their permission to pause. Even if someone expects an immediate response. Even if the moment feels tense. Silence during the pause is not weakness. It is control. Controlled individuals slow down when pressure increases. They do not rush to prove themselves. They do not rush to defend themselves. They evaluate first. Evaluation improves judgment. Judgment strengthens internal authority. Many conflicts escalate because two people react at the same time. One reaction triggers another. Intensity increases. Voices rise. Emotion spreads. But when one person pauses, escalation weakens. The reaction chain breaks. The situation stabilizes. Your discipline influences the environment. This influence becomes visible over time. People notice who reacts quickly. They also notice who remains steady. Steady individuals command attention. They appear confident. They appear controlled. But the secret is simple. They pause before reacting. Reaction feels powerful in the moment. But discipline is more powerful in the long term. Reaction creates noise. Discipline creates clarity. Clarity leads to better decisions. Better decisions strengthen authority. Authority reinforces discipline. It's not about emotion. It's about discipline. Emotion will always appear. Triggers will always exist. Situations will always change. The only stable element is your response. Your response determines whether authority stays internal or moves outward. Reactive individuals give control to the environment. Disciplined individuals keep control inside. This difference shapes everything. It shapes communication. It shapes leadership. It shapes self-respect. Over time, the pause becomes natural. Emotion appears. But reaction slows. Your breathing remains steady. Your thinking remains clear. Your voice remains calm. Others may escalate. You remain deliberate. That difference creates internal authority. Authority grows each time you control a reaction. The more reactions you control, the stronger discipline becomes. Eventually, reaction stops leading behavior. Observation becomes the first step. Observation strengthens clarity. Clarity strengthens discipline. And discipline strengthens authority. You have now learned how reaction transfers control away from you. You have learned how a simple pause restores authority. But reactions are only part of the challenge. The next step is controlling something even more powerful. Your attention. Because wherever attention goes, influence follows. Attention is the gateway to influence. Whatever enters your attention begins shaping your mind. Most people never question what they allow into it. They check every notification. They read every opinion. They listen to every emotional reaction around them. Their attention moves constantly. Pulled by noise. Pulled by urgency. Pulled by distraction. When attention is uncontrolled, authority disappears. External influence begins guiding thought. That's the key. Attention determines who holds authority over your mind. If attention is scattered, discipline weakens. If attention is guarded, discipline strengthens. Most people believe their reactions come from events. In reality, reactions often come from attention. They replay a comment repeatedly. They revisit a problem again and again. They analyze a disagreement for hours. Attention magnifies the situation. Emotion grows. The mind becomes unstable. The event may have lasted seconds, but attention keeps it alive. You have a choice. Let attention wander freely, or direct it deliberately. Undisciplined attention feeds emotional instability. Disciplined attention restores control. Guarding attention begins with awareness. Notice what repeatedly enters your mind. Notice what captures your focus. Notice what drains your mental energy. Many things compete for your attention. News cycles, arguments, opinions, complaints. If you allow everything inside your mind, clarity disappears. Noise replaces judgment. Stillness protects attention. When you pause and observe your thoughts, you begin to see what occupies your focus. Some thoughts deserve attention. Many do not. Disciplined individuals make this distinction quickly. They redirect attention away from noise. They focus on what matters. This is a trained behavior. Attention does not control itself. It must be guided. You do not need their permission to ignore distractions. Not every message deserves response. Not every opinion deserves consideration. Not every criticism deserves attention. When attention becomes selective, discipline becomes easier. Emotional reactions weaken because the mind is no longer feeding them. Many emotional conflicts grow because attention remains fixed on them. The mind replays the situation, replays the tone, replays the perceived offense. Each replay strengthens the emotional reaction. But when attention shifts away, emotion loses intensity. The nervous system stabilizes. Clarity returns. Clarity strengthens internal authority. Guarding attention also protects your energy. Mental energy is limited. When attention is constantly pulled outward, exhaustion appears. Exhausted minds react emotionally. Disciplined attention prevents this fatigue. It preserves focus. It preserves clarity. It preserves stability. Stable attention strengthens decision-making. Clear decisions reinforce discipline. It's not about the world becoming quieter. The world will always create noise. The challenge is protecting your focus inside that noise. Many people believe they must respond to everything. They believe they must monitor every situation. This belief weakens authority. Authority grows when attention becomes intentional. You decide where your focus goes. Not the environment. Not the crowd. Not the noise. This control becomes powerful over time. When your attention remains stable, emotional triggers lose influence. Distractions lose urgency. Situations become easier to evaluate calmly. Calm evaluation improves judgment. Judgment strengthens discipline. Disciplined individuals treat attention like a valuable resource. They protect it carefully. They invest it deliberately. They withdraw it quickly when something does not deserve it. This habit strengthens internal authority. Authority over attention leads to authority over emotion. Authority over emotion leads to authority over behavior. Everything begins with focus. You have a choice. Allow the world to control your attention. Or control your attention deliberately. When attention becomes disciplined, clarity becomes constant. Clarity strengthens judgment. Judgment strengthens internal authority. And internal authority protects discipline. You have now learned how attention shapes influence over your mind. But attention alone cannot protect authority. Authority must also remain stable when pressure increases. Because pressure often causes attention to collapse. Pressure reveals discipline. Anyone can appear calm when situations are easy. When nothing demands urgency. When no one challenges them. When decisions carry little consequence. Calm in those moments requires little effort. But pressure changes the environment. Deadlines appear. Mistakes surface. Conflict begins. Uncertainty grows. Emotion rises quickly. Most people lose stability in these moments. They rush their decisions. They defend themselves immediately. They react to every signal of urgency. In those moments, authority disappears. That's the key. Pressure does not destroy discipline. Pressure exposes whether discipline exists. If your behavior depends on comfort, pressure will control you. If your behavior follows standards, pressure will not change it. Many people treat pressure as danger. Their nervous system reacts instantly. Breathing becomes shallow. Muscles tighten. Thoughts accelerate. Emotion takes control. The mind believes speed will solve the problem. But speed without clarity creates mistakes. Mistakes increase pressure. The cycle continues. Stillness interrupts this cycle. When pressure appears, slow down deliberately. Pause. Observe the situation. Notice the urge to react quickly. Do not obey that urge. Urgency often produces poor decisions. Calm produces accurate decisions. Accurate decisions reduce pressure. Disciplined individuals understand this difference. They do not rush when tension increases. They become more deliberate, more observant, more controlled. This shift protects internal authority. You do not need their permission to remain calm under pressure. Even when others are reacting emotionally. Even when voices rise. Even when the situation appears chaotic. Your behavior belongs to you. Your reaction belongs to you. Pressure does not decide your response. Discipline decides it. Many emotional mistakes occur during pressure. Someone criticizes you. Someone challenges your decision. Someone questions your ability. Emotion appears instantly. The urge to defend becomes powerful. Defensive reactions often escalate the situation. They create conflict. They create confusion. But when you pause, clarity returns. You evaluate the criticism calmly. You determine whether it contains truth. If it does, you adjust. If it does not, you remain steady. This deliberate evaluation strengthens authority. Authority grows when your behavior remains stable during tension. People notice this stability. They notice who reacts. They notice who remains composed. Composed individuals influence the environment. Their calm behavior reduces chaos. Their clarity improves direction. This influence becomes powerful in leadership. But leadership begins with internal discipline. Pressure must never control your state. If pressure controls your emotions, authority moves outward. When authority moves outward, discipline weakens. This is why stillness matters. Stillness creates space between pressure and reaction. In that space, the mind regains clarity. Clarity restores judgment. Judgment strengthens discipline. It's not about eliminating pressure. Pressure will always exist. Challenges will appear. Unexpected situations will arise. Authority is measured by how you behave during those moments. Disciplined individuals treat pressure as information, not as threat. Information can be evaluated calmly. Threat triggers emotional reaction. When pressure appears, you ask simple questions. What actually matters right now? What action will improve the situation? What can be ignored? These questions restore focus. Focus protects discipline. Discipline strengthens internal authority. Over time, calm becomes your default reaction to pressure. Your breathing slows automatically. Your posture stabilizes. Your thinking becomes precise. Others may escalate emotionally. You remain deliberate. That difference builds credibility. Credibility strengthens influence. Influence reinforces authority. All of it begins with calm discipline under pressure. You have a choice. Let pressure control your reaction.
Or remain steady while others rush.
When you remain steady, clarity grows. When clarity grows, discipline strengthens. And discipline protects internal authority. You have now learned how pressure reveals discipline. But pressure is not the only challenge.
Authority must also remain stable when emotion becomes intense.
Because strong emotion often overrides judgment. The next step is learning how to regulate emotional intensity. Emotion begins quietly. A small irritation. A brief frustration. A sudden disappointment.
The feeling appears inside the body before it appears in behavior.
Heart rate increases. Breathing becomes shallow. Muscles tighten. Thoughts accelerate.
These signals are the beginning of emotional intensity.
Most people ignore them. They only notice emotion when it becomes strong. By that point, reaction feels inevitable. That is the mistake. That's the key. Emotional discipline begins early. It begins when you recognize intensity before it grows. When emotion first appears, you have influence. Once it escalates, control becomes difficult. Most people react only after emotion dominates the moment. Disciplined individuals respond before that point. They notice the first signal. The tension in the body. The change in breathing. The urge to react. Recognition creates opportunity. Opportunity allows discipline. You have a choice. Allow emotional intensity to grow.
Or regulate it deliberately.
Many people unknowingly increase emotional intensity.
They replay the situation in their mind. They imagine arguments.
They exaggerate the problem.
Attention feeds the emotion.
Emotion grows stronger. Reaction becomes more likely. This process feels automatic. But it is not.
It is trained behavior. And trained behavior can change.
Stillness interrupts emotional escalation. The moment you notice emotional tension, pause. Do not react. Shift attention to your breathing.
Slow the breath deliberately.
Inhale slowly. Exhale longer.
Longer exhalation signals calm to the nervous system. The body begins to regulate itself.
Heart rate decreases. Muscle tension weakens.
The emotional surge begins to fade.
Clarity returns. Clarity strengthens. Discipline.
You do not need their permission to regulate your emotional state.
Even when the situation feels intense. Even when someone else is reacting strongly. Your nervous system belongs to you. Authority begins with control over it. Posture also affects emotional intensity. When emotion rises, the body often contracts. Shoulders tighten. Jaw clenches. Hands tense.
These signals communicate danger to the brain.
The brain responds by increasing emotional urgency. But if you deliberately relax your posture, the message changes. Relaxed posture signals safety. Safety weakens emotional escalation.
This physical shift may seem small, but it changes the entire emotional trajectory. Disciplined individuals learn to regulate these signals quickly. They slow their breathing. They release tension from the body. They remain still while emotion settles.
Stillness is not passive. Stillness is strategic. It prevents emotion from dominating behavior. It allows clarity to return before decisions are made. Once clarity returns, judgment improves. Improved judgment strengthens internal authority.
Many conflicts escalate simply because emotional intensity was never regulated.
Two people react. Both nervous systems accelerate. Both voices rise. Emotion spreads.
But when one person regulates their state, the dynamic changes.
Calm behavior influences the environment.
Others often begin to regulate themselves.
Your discipline becomes contagious. This influence is powerful. It stabilizes conversations. It prevents unnecessary conflict. It strengthens leadership.
But this control requires practice.
Every emotional trigger becomes training.
Every frustration becomes practice.
Each moment of tension becomes an opportunity. Instead of reacting, regulate. Instead of escalating, breathe. Instead of speaking immediately, pause. Over time, the body learns this pattern. Emotional surges become shorter. Reactions become slower. Your presence becomes steadier. This steadiness builds confidence. Confidence strengthens discipline. It's not about eliminating emotion. Emotion will always appear. Emotion carries information.
But information does not require immediate reaction.
Discipline evaluates before acting. Emotion suggests. Discipline decides. You have a choice. Allow emotional intensity to dictate your behavior.
Or regulate your internal state deliberately.
Regulation weakens emotional escalation. Weak escalation restores clarity. Clarity strengthens discipline. And discipline strengthens internal authority. You have now learned how to regulate emotional intensity. But another habit often destabilizes authority.
The habit of overinterpreting situations. Because the mind frequently creates emotional problems that never existed.
Most emotional reactions begin with interpretation, not with facts. Something happens. A message arrives. A comment sounds sharp. Someone responds briefly. The event is simple. But the mind begins building meaning around it. Maybe they are disrespecting you. Maybe they are criticizing you. Maybe they are ignoring you. These assumptions appear instantly. Emotion follows the interpretation. The feeling becomes intense. The reaction feels justified. But the reaction is responding to a story, not to reality. That's the key. Emotion reacts to interpretation more than facts.
Most people never pause to examine this difference.
They assume their first interpretation must be correct. They react immediately. Reaction strengthens the interpretation.
Soon the mind believes the story completely.
Conflict begins. All from a conclusion that was never verified. You have a choice. Believe the first explanation your mind produces. Or examine it calmly. Stillness allows examination.
Without stillness, the mind rushes forward.
It searches for certainty.
When information is incomplete, imagination fills the gap. Imagination often favors negative explanations.
The brain evolved to detect danger quickly.
But in modern situations, this habit creates unnecessary tension.
Someone sends a short message. Your mind interprets the tone as irritation. Emotion rises. But the reality may be simple. They may be busy. They may be distracted. They may simply be brief. The interpretation appeared faster than the facts. This pattern happens constantly. Someone walks past without greeting you.
The mind assumes rejection.
Someone questions your idea.
The mind assumes attack.
Someone pauses before answering.
The mind assumes judgment.
Interpretation happens instantly. Emotion reacts instantly. Discipline interrupts this pattern. When emotion appears, pause. Ask a simple question. What actually happened? Focus only on observable facts. Words spoken. Actions taken. Messages written. Facts remain stable. Interpretations are assumptions. When you separate the two, emotional distortion weakens. You do not need their permission to question your interpretation. Even if the feeling feels convincing. Even if your mind insists the conclusion is obvious. Discipline examines before reacting. Examination restores clarity. Clarity stabilizes emotion. Overinterpretation drains mental energy. Many people replay conversations repeatedly. They analyze tone. They analyze pauses. They analyze expressions. The mind continues building stories. Emotion grows stronger with every replay. But the situation has already ended. Only attention keeps the interpretation alive. Stillness breaks this cycle. When you notice the mind replaying the situation, redirect attention. Return to breathing. Return to the present moment. Let the interpretation fade. When attention moves away, emotion loses intensity. Clarity returns naturally. Disciplined individuals do not waste attention on imagined meanings. They gather information before reacting. They wait for context. Often the situation becomes clearer with time. Many emotional conflicts disappear when people simply pause long enough to see the full picture. But emotional urgency pushes people to act too quickly. Urgency creates mistakes. Stillness weakens urgency. Calm observation protects discipline. This habit strengthens internal authority. Authority over perception protects authority over behavior. When interpretation slows, emotional reactions become rare. Situations remain manageable. The mind remains quiet. Quiet minds make better decisions. Better decisions reinforce discipline. It's not about emotion. It's about discipline. Emotion may appear quickly. But interpretation must slow down. When interpretation slows, clarity grows. Clarity protects judgment. Judgment strengthens internal authority. You have a choice. Allow your mind to invent emotional meanings in every situation. Or train yourself to observe facts first. Observation weakens emotional escalation. Weak escalation restores calm thinking. Calm thinking strengthens discipline. You have now learned how interpretation creates unnecessary emotional reactions. But even when interpretation is accurate, emotional pressure can still appear. Authority must remain stable during those moments. The next step is learning how to remain calm when tension increases. Stress exposes weakness in discipline. Anyone can appear calm when life is easy. When nothing challenges them. When no one questions them. When decisions carry little consequence. Calm in those moments requires little effort. But stress changes the environment. Deadlines appear. Mistakes surface. Pressure increases. Uncertainty spreads. Emotion rises quickly. Most people lose stability in these moments. Their breathing accelerates. Their thoughts become chaotic. Their reactions become impulsive. The mind rushes to regain control. But rushing often creates more problems. That's the key. Stress does not remove discipline. Stress reveals whether discipline exists. If your behavior depends on comfort, stress will control you. If your behavior follows standards, stress will not change it. Many people treat stress as danger. Their nervous system reacts immediately. Heart rate increases. Muscles tighten. Attention narrows. The brain prepares for conflict. This response once protected survival. But in modern situations it often creates unnecessary reactions. Reaction replaces judgment. Judgment disappears. Stillness interrupts this pattern. When stress appears, slow down deliberately. Pause. Take one slow breath. Then another. Let the body settle before you respond. The situation may feel urgent. But urgency rarely improves thinking. Calm thinking improves outcomes. Disciplined individuals understand this difference. They do not rush during pressure. They slow their reactions. They observe carefully. They evaluate before acting. This behavior protects internal authority. You do not need their permission to remain calm under stress. Even if others are reacting emotionally. Even if voices rise. Even if the situation becomes tense. Your state belongs to you. Stress does not control your reaction. Discipline controls your reaction.
Many emotional mistakes occur during stressful moments.
Someone criticizes your decision. Someone questions your competence. Someone demands an immediate answer. Emotion appears instantly. The urge to defend becomes powerful. Defensive reactions often escalate tension. They create conflict. They create confusion. But when you pause, clarity returns. You examine the situation calmly.
You determine whether the criticism contains truth.
If it does, you adjust. If it does not, you remain steady. This deliberate response strengthens authority.
Authority grows when behavior remains stable during pressure.
People notice this stability.
They notice who reacts emotionally.
They notice who remains composed. Composed individuals influence the environment. Their calm behavior reduces chaos.
Their clarity improves direction.
This influence becomes powerful in leadership. But leadership begins with internal discipline. Stress must never dictate behavior. If stress controls your reactions, authority leaves your mind.
When authority leaves the mind, discipline weakens.
This is why stillness matters. Stillness creates space between pressure and response.
In that space, the mind regains clarity.
Clarity restores judgment. Judgment strengthens discipline. Over time, calm becomes your default reaction to stress.
Your breathing slows automatically.
Your posture stabilizes. Your thinking becomes precise. Others may escalate emotionally. You remain deliberate. That difference builds credibility. Credibility strengthens influence. Influence reinforces authority. It's not about eliminating stress. Stress will always exist. Challenges will always appear.
Authority is measured by how you behave during those moments. Disciplined individuals treat stress as information,
not as threat. Information can be evaluated calmly. Threat triggers emotional reaction.
When stress appears, you focus on what matters.
What must be done now? What can wait? What does not matter?
This clarity simplifies the situation. Simple focus reduces emotional pressure.
Reduced pressure strengthens discipline. You have a choice. Allow stress to control your reactions.
Or remain calm while others rush.
When calm remains steady, clarity grows. When clarity grows, discipline strengthens. And discipline protects internal authority.
You have now learned how to remain calm during stress. But authority must also remain stable when emotions become intense. Because emotion from other people can disrupt even disciplined minds.
The next step is learning how to stay steady when others react emotionally. Emotions spread quickly between people. One person becomes angry. Another person reacts.
Soon the entire situation becomes emotional.
Voices rise. Tension grows. Reason disappears. Most people are pulled into this pattern without noticing.
They mirror the emotional energy around them.
If someone speaks with anger, they respond with anger. If someone becomes defensive, they defend themselves harder.
The emotional atmosphere controls the room. That is where authority disappears.
That's the key. Internal authority means your behavior does not mirror emotional chaos. Other people may react emotionally. You do not have to follow them. Most people believe emotional reaction is unavoidable in these moments. They believe they must defend themselves immediately.
They believe they must respond with equal intensity.
But discipline refuses that pattern. You have a choice. Join the emotional escalation.
Or remain steady while others react.
When someone becomes emotional, the first impulse is to react. The body prepares for confrontation. Breathing changes. Muscles tighten. Thoughts accelerate.
The urge to respond becomes powerful.
This is where discipline must appear. Pause. Observe the reaction without becoming part of it. Stillness weakens emotional contagion. Contagion depends on imitation. When one person escalates, the other usually follows. Escalation grows quickly. But when one person remains calm, the pattern breaks. Without imitation, emotional momentum weakens. You do not need their permission to remain steady. Even if someone speaks aggressively. Even if someone blames you unfairly. Even if someone attempts to provoke a reaction. Their emotion belongs to them. Your behavior belongs to you. When you remember this distinction, authority remains internal.
Many conflicts continue because both sides react at the same time.
One reaction invites another. Intensity multiplies.
Soon the original issue disappears. Only emotion remains.
But when one person pauses, the escalation slows. Calm behavior interrupts the cycle. Observation replaces reaction. Observation reveals what actually matters. You begin to see the real issue behind the emotion. Often the emotional reaction is not about the current situation. It may come from stress, from frustration, from previous conflict.
When you remain calm, you create space for clarity.
Clear perception allows better responses.
Better responses stabilize the situation. Disciplined individuals use calm communication during emotional tension.
They speak slowly.
They use fewer words.
They avoid defensive tone.
Their calm behavior reduces pressure. Others often begin to regulate themselves.
Your stability becomes a reference point.
The emotional atmosphere changes.
This influence is powerful.
People trust individuals who remain steady during conflict.
Steady behavior signals confidence. Confidence signals authority. Authority strengthens discipline. It's not about emotion. It's about discipline. Emotion will always exist in human interaction. But behavior must remain deliberate.
When others react emotionally, your discipline becomes more important. Your calm protects clarity.
Your clarity protects judgment. Your judgment protects authority.
Over time, this skill becomes natural.
Someone reacts emotionally. You remain steady. Someone attempts to provoke you. You observe instead of reacting. Someone escalates tension. You maintain composure.
This difference changes how people interact with you. They recognize that emotional manipulation does not work.
They recognize that your behavior cannot be controlled through reaction. Your presence becomes stabilizing. Stable individuals influence their environment without force.
Their discipline shapes the tone of the conversation.
Their calm reduces emotional noise. Their authority becomes visible. This is the result of consistent discipline. You have a choice. Let other people's emotions control your behavior. Or remain steady while emotion moves around you. Stability weakens emotional escalation. Weak escalation restores clarity. Clarity strengthens discipline. And discipline protects internal authority.
You have now learned how to remain stable when others react emotionally. But internal authority requires one final step.
Authority must become your natural state. Not something you attempt occasionally, but something that defines how you behave every day. Most people spend their lives reacting. Reacting to pressure. Reacting to emotion. Reacting to expectation. Reacting to approval.
Their behavior changes depending on the environment. When the situation is calm, they appear stable.
When pressure increases, their behavior changes. When someone criticizes them, they react. When someone praises them, they react. Their authority moves constantly. It never remains inside the mind.
That is why discipline feels difficult.
Because control never stays internal. That's the key. Internal authority means your behavior follows principles. Not pressure. Not approval. Not emotion. Principles remain stable. Pressure changes. Emotion changes. Opinions change. When behavior follows something unstable, discipline collapses. But when behavior follows principles, authority remains steady. Many people believe authority comes from position, from status, from recognition. But true authority begins inside the mind. It is the ability to guide your own behavior regardless of circumstances. It is the ability to remain deliberate while others react. It is the ability to think clearly while pressure increases. You have a choice. Allow the environment to shape your behavior, or build internal authority strong enough to resist it. Internal authority requires consistent discipline. You pause before reacting. You observe before speaking. You evaluate before deciding. These habits create stability. Stability builds self-trust. Self-trust strengthens discipline. Over time, discipline becomes identity. Your behavior no longer depends on mood. It no longer depends on approval. It no longer depends on comfort. It follows your standards. Standards anchor authority. When standards guide behavior, decision-making becomes simple. You do not negotiate every action. You follow the principle you already defined. This consistency creates calm. Calm strengthens judgment. Judgment strengthens authority. But many people resist this level of discipline. They prefer flexibility. They prefer emotional freedom. But emotional freedom often becomes emotional instability. Instability weakens authority. Authority requires structure. Structure requires discipline. It's not about emotion. It's about discipline. Emotion may appear, but emotion does not decide behavior. Principles decide behavior. Disciplined individuals become predictable in the best way. Their reactions remain measured. Their communication remains calm. Their thinking remains clear. Others begin to recognize this stability. They see that your decisions are not easily influenced. They see that your behavior does not change with pressure. They see that your authority is internal. This presence becomes powerful. People respect individuals who control themselves. Self-control signals strength. Strength signals reliability. Reliability builds trust. Trust creates influence. Influence grows naturally when discipline is consistent. But influence is not the goal. Authority is the goal. Authority over your mind. Authority over your reactions. Authority over your decisions. When authority becomes internal, your environment loses power over you. Criticism does not destabilize you. Pressure does not rush you. Emotion does not control you. You remain deliberate. You remain steady. You remain clear. This is the result of disciplined behavior practiced repeatedly. Internal authority is not created in one moment. It is built through hundreds of decisions. Every pause strengthens it. Every controlled reaction reinforces it. Every disciplined action protects it. Eventually, discipline stops feeling like effort. It becomes identity. You become someone who does not react impulsively. Someone who does not follow pressure. Someone who does not seek approval. You become someone who acts according to principle. That is internal authority. You have a choice. Continue reacting to the world around you, or become the authority guiding your own behavior. Authority begins with discipline. And discipline begins with control over yourself. Internal authority is not granted. It is built. Every reaction you control strengthens it. Every moment of stillness reinforces it. Most people surrender authority to emotion. They follow pressure. They chase approval. They react to noise. Discipline refuses that pattern. It pauses. It observes. It decides deliberately. The mind becomes steady. Decisions become clear. Behavior becomes consistent.
Internal authority grows through repeated control.
Not once. Not occasionally. Every day. Every situation. Every reaction. Your challenge is simple. Stop letting external forces command your behavior. Guard your attention. Control your reactions. Follow your standards. Build authority inside your own mind. Then maintain it. Relentlessly.